Thank you all for joining us for our February webinar. Hey, Jocelyn. So we did something a little different this time. We allow folks to have your camera on if you want to be able to just be another face in the room. This is set up like a fireside chat version. So you'll be hearing from Keya and Toni a little later, and just want to make y'all feel like you're a part of the room with us. Hello there. If you could also in the chat just put your name and what organization you're from. If you want to tell us what you do, that would be great too. And if you're a person in recovery, we'd love to know that as well. I'm gonna give it just a couple more minutes and then we'll officially go ahead and get started, and I'll type what I just said. Okay. So this month's webinar is Speaking Power to Recovery, a fireside chat on empowering loved ones with compassion. And we have a really dynamic session set up for you all that's going to cover the whole spectrum of recovery and how we can support others in recovery, as well as how we can support loved ones, the family and friends of those who are in recovery. So our agenda today, after this welcome, I'll talk a little bit more about Georgia Recovers. I'll go ahead and introduce our speakers. We'll go into our fireside chat, and then of course we'll have our Q&A session. So this webinar is being recorded, and a copy of the presentation is going to be available on the Georgia Recovers website. So if y'all just give us a few days afterwards, we'll make sure everything looks good on our end, and then it'll get uploaded to the website. Right now, you're all muted, but as I mentioned, we are doing things a little bit differently. So at the end for the Q&A portion, we will allow folks to come off of mute. Right now, if you want to come on camera, you can. You don't have to, but if you'd like to, we'd love to see you. In the meantime, you can absolutely use the Q&A panel on your screen. I'm not sure if it's on the bottom or the top there, but that will allow you to ask any questions. As we're going through, if any questions pop up, feel free to just drop them in that Q&A panel. You could also use the chat, use your reaction buttons. We love to see those hearts, those claps, all those different things. Please keep interactive with us. Our interpreter, Sarita, is going to remain spotlighted throughout the webinar. So if you want to adjust your view so that you can see her, you can do that in the top right corner. You click view, there's like 4 squares there, click view, and you'll be able to spotlight her there. And you can feel free to use the stream text link to access the live transcript of the webinar. Okay, so I'm going to go through what Georgia Recover is, who we are. Georgia Recovers is an evidence-based public health campaign, and our aim is to reduce the prejudice and discrimination associated with substance use disorder in Georgia. This is brought to you by DBHDD, which is the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities, and it builds off of the amazing work that was done by the Georgia Council for Recovery. And so this campaign has 3 goals. 1, we want to increase knowledge about substance use disorder and show that recovery is not only possible, but it's probable. We also want to improve attitudes towards those living with and or in recovery from substance use disorder. And we want to strengthen the capacity of stakeholders, that's all of you all, organizations and individuals already responding to the crisis. We have 3 pillars of work. First is our community connection. So we connect with community organizations across the state. You'll hear us multiple times say, hey, if you want to be a partner, join here. And then we also have our Community Impact Committee, which guides the direction of the campaign. You're going to hear from 2 of those CIC members today, and I see some have also joined us in the audience. Story sharing. We collect stories of recovery and allyship, and these stories are shared across our social media channels, which for us is Instagram and Facebook. And then lastly, education. So our campaign is changing attitudes by promoting messaging that speaks to hope and recovery. And we have these webinars like this that are hosted bi-monthly to shed light on topics related to substance use disorder. So before I do the speaker introduction, again, if you've come in after I've already started, please introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us your name, where you're from, your organization, if you're in recovery, how many years you have in recovery. We'd also be interested to have you join us through our link tree. I'm going to drop that link in the chat. Uh, I'll drop that link in the chat at some point. But that link tree, or Kenyana, if you have it available, if you don't mind dropping it in the chat, the link tree brings you to all of our digital. So you'll get our website, our Facebook, our Instagram, all of our digital footprint is on there, as well as some additional resources. So now I'd like to introduce our speakers. First is Keya Jess. Keya, if you'd like to come on camera. Keya is the forensic peer mentor at Circle of Recovery. She is a person in long-term recovery, and what that means is she has not found it necessary to use drugs or alcohol to cope with life. She has been on her recovery journey since January 28th, 2014. While on her journey, she developed a passion to help others who were struggling in the areas that she gained strength in. This desire helped her create a career with CARES as a certified peer specialist and a forensic peer mentor. And she was recently accepted in the CPS mental health training as well, which is, I'm assuming you've obtained that certification since this was written. During her recovery journey, she received an associate's degree in business management and is presently a senior at Savannah State University pursuing a bachelor's in social work. After graduating, she will continue her education to receive a master's in social work. And with a global mindset, she was able to work with different cultures and social issues. Keya was recently awarded a scholarship to study abroad in Ghana, Accra, and volunteered in the Supreme Court in Ghana. Her service learning experience was in the ministries of police services, in the domestic violence unit, and family services. Welcome, Keya.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
And next will be Toni. Toni, if you'd like to come on camera. Toni Jackson is the Director of Community Response at Policing Alternatives and Diversion Initiative. Toni is a true advocate for underserved communities and marginalized populations due to her roots and upbringing in Atlanta, Georgia. While her first love was cosmetology and boosting Black women's self-confidence, being exposed to people's different trials and tribulations naturally catapulted her into more impactful social work. She's currently the Director of Community Response Services with Policing Alternatives and Diversions Initiative, a nonprofit that dispatches teams into the community to divert from arrest for offenses related to substance use, mental health, and poverty. As an Atlanta native, she hasn't been afraid to get involved with community organizing and outreach, as she's previously worked for and volunteered at various social service agencies. She's supported people from all different walks of life by helping them establish employment, housing, medical, mental health care, mindset shifts, and ultimately safer lives. With each endeavor, she's dedicated to exemplifying what it means to be a leader of integrity and advocacy, often going to bat for basic human decency. She finds social service to be rewarding and what it means to live in and on purpose. In her free time, she enjoys hiking with her sons, painting, and finding cool new things to do in the beautiful city of Atlanta. And her mantra is be the change that you wish to see in the world, which is a quote from Gandhi. Thank you both so much. I'm going to stop sharing my screen at this point, and we are going to get into our chat. Okay, so the first question is for, well, actually, before we get into the chat, Toni or Keya, did either of you want to say anything or introduce yourselves further before we jump right into the discussion?
That was a great introduction. I will just say I am very, very happy to be here chatting with all of you today.
Wonderful.
And I would say the same thing. Thanks for having me. This is an honor, and that was a beautiful introduction. Thank you so much.
Great. Okay, so Toni, the first question is for you. How can we help our loved ones understand how addiction affects the brain?
It's important to get our loved ones to understand addiction is a disease of the brain and not just a moral weakness. I believe people with the mindset that addiction is a moral weakness, they have less tolerance, patience, grace, and really more so dry stigma around addiction. And so I think it's important for loved ones to understand that dopamine is important for memory, learning, behavior, and motivation. And when we experience pleasure, our brain releases neurotransmitters called dopamine. The feeling of being high is that dopamine feeling that users are chasing. And I think that as long as loved ones understand there is a science behind the addiction, a medical science behind the addiction, and understand how it works on the brain, they could be a little less, did I say judgmental?
That's the
And
word. Yep.
a little more open and understanding. They loved ones just need to be educated. They need to understand that continued long-term drug use results in the brain reducing the number of dopamine receptors, and so that's the user constantly chasing that high. Um, and they need to understand that the use of medications to help someone manage the disease of addiction is not a crutch or a replacement for the substance, but medications improve both survival and retention and treatment as well.
That's all great information. I'm gonna jump to the question where we ask, how long does it take for the brain to heal from addiction?
Well, it could take at least 90 days, but of course longer than that. The how long rewiring the brain from addiction takes depends on multiple factors such as severity of the addiction, the age of the person, their mental health status. But research shows that it takes at least 90 days of abstinence for the brain to start healing and creating neural pathways. There are many stages to recovery. Early stages of recovery include detox and withdrawal, also includes stabilization and cognitive changes. Mid to late recovery would include consolidation and continued healing, and long term recovery essentially would sustain brain rewiring.
And I think the key thing to remember here is that the brain does heal. It's not like once I remember back in the day there was the TV ad that would be like, this is your brain on drugs, and they like crack the egg in the pan and it's like, oh, you're done, and
Right,
that's not true, right? Your brain can heal. And you talked about these neurotransmitters and dopamine, all of that can be pretty much restored to what it needs to be. Thank you for
right.
that.
There isn't an actual cure, but there are many treatments to choose from, and the
Mhm.
brain can heal and recover. For some people, that could look like 90 days. For some people, that could look like the rest of their lives, depending on how challenged they are with recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some examples of a compassionate conversation? Tony, I'll have you jump into that first.
I love this part. So at my organization, we respond to referrals in the community and we lead with compassion. Like it's a must. If you aren't in the mental space, if you don't have the emotional capacity to lead with compassion, don't come to work. That's how I feel about it. So our PTO here is amazing. We give mental health days just to avoid burnout, to help treat burnout. But we lead every engagement in our response services here at PAD with compassion and empathy and understanding. Um, Sorry, I lost my place.
No worries. I love that you work for an organization that aligns with your values.
Absolutely. I don't see myself leaving anytime soon. I think that is a really key piece when it comes to working with the population that struggles with substance use. And compassionate conversation can, to start, you would just check in on their feelings. Just a simple, how are you? And if you would like to take it any further, you've noticed that they've seemed down a bit or frazzled or discouraged. Is there anything they would like to talk about? Acknowledge their effort, give rewards, acknowledgement, recognition, celebrate them, offer your support, of course. If you're feeling overwhelmed, would you like to do something relaxing together? And then, of course, validate their struggles. People want to be seen, people want to be heard, people want to be understood. And that's just across the board, challenge or struggling with anything in life. We want to be seen, heard, and understood. And to just provide that space for them to feel seen, heard, and understood. Express your belief in them, cheer them on, be their biggest cheerleaders. Avoid judgmental language, avoid enabling behaviors, avoid pressuring them to talk. If they're not in the space to talk, give them time, give them room, let them find their words, let them identify what it is that they're feeling first. And then don't minimize their struggles either. I find that disheartening, slightly offensive. um, you want to validate them in every possible way that you can. Of course, active listening, pay full attention, make eye contact, maintain eye contact, and even reflect back what you hear to show your understanding. I statements like express your own feelings and concern without blaming. That gets a little tricky though, because if you're trying to just be relatable, it could seem like or be received as you're taking over or making the conversation about you. So there's a fine line between being relatable and making the conversation about you. And then, of course, focus on the positive, highlight the positive, and respect their boundaries first and foremost. And really just respect autonomy and one's power to make their own decisions for their lives.
That was so good. So many good nuggets in there. And I think the main theme I heard in what you were saying was make it about that person, right? Like how are they doing? What do they need? What are they feeling? As the listener, and this is something Key and I talked about yesterday, like it's okay to just take in
Yeah,
the information. Like you don't always got to be like, oh, you need to do this. You need like it's okay to just take it in, right?
yeah, exactly.
Wonderful. Um, I'm going to jump to Kia and then we'll come back to you, Tony, with some of your other questions. I think it'll flow well. So, Kia, do you mind talking about some examples of different recovery pathways and how they work?
Okay, so different recovery pathways can, and this is from my experience, and this is from the experience of others. You can have a pathway of 12-step fellowship. You can have a pathway of spirituality, that may be church, however it is for you, however you see it. You can have a recovery pathway of anything that you can really tap into and find support in that area. Uh, Tap in. I find that artworks also, that could be a recovery pathway. It's whatever you feel supported, whatever you feel comfortable in, that will be your recovery pathway. And for me, I started out in one recovery pathway, and today I find that I'm pulling from different pathways. So you don't have to just select one and just be on that road. You can have a multitude of different pathways.
Which leads to the next question, which is how can individuals find the recovery pathway that works best for them, or even, how can families support with helping somebody find that recovery pathway that works best for them?
So, like I said, from my experience, having an open mind, like when I first started my recovery journey, there were suggestions to do this, do that, go this route, go that route. And I had a closed mind because somebody told me this is the way. And so if you have that open mind and able to try different pathways, you would understand and know which pathway fits better for you. So I feel like that's your choice, where you're comfortable, where you're supported. Um, that will be your pathway in choosing. As for family, and family need to just be open minded. And from experience, I know family have been. Some families may not have. I'm speaking for mine. Some families may not have been trust in your judgment, so to speak, because of that the choices I've made in the past. But if a family member would just be open minded and say, okay, she's choosing this, I'm going to have confidence in that walk with her, even though she messed up 50,000 billion times. I'm still going to be like, okay, I'm gonna have confidence in this walk with her. She's trying something different, or maybe she's maybe on the same recovery path. Whatever it is, just have an open mind and trust the process.
Absolutely. Um, So, Tony, I'm going to jump to you in the question about community support and recovery. So, what does that look like? How do peer support groups help individuals build resilience? Kia just gave us a bunch of examples of different recovery pathways, but when we think about the communities that surround this, how does it help people build their resilience?
I think that might be the most important aspect and piece to recovery for sure. Community support, particularly through peer support groups, plays a vital role in recovery by providing a safe space for individuals to share experiences, to receive emotional validation, to gain practical advice, and to help build confidence and resilience to push through and endure and be resilient towards their struggle. Emotional validation and reduced isolation, I think, is a huge factor when it comes to supporting someone struggling with anything in life, but particularly substance use challenges. Um, you want to not feel so alone. And so the space of those peer groups with people discussing similar experiences, similar challenges, similar family dynamics that might be harming more than helping, just to have that safe space, to have that open, honest, transparent dialogue, and to be honest and to fellowship really is super important when it comes to recovery. That peer groups also provide an opportunity for accountability as well as support. And then it helps to develop social skills and helps to normalize the experiences that you're having. And overall, it really does just support the recovery journey.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about safe spaces. I know each of you have a question around the safe space. So, Key, I'm going to start with you. What does a safe space mean when we're talking about the context of recovery and we're trying to create these safe spaces?
Okay, so to understand a safe space is it's a space to where a person feel comfortable, feel understood, and just imagine being out in active addiction and you're in this dark, dark place, and it's like a dark room, and you feel afraid, timid. You don't know what's going to happen. I carried that into my recovery journey in the beginning, and so I didn't know who to trust. I was fearful that people would leave or people would talk about my business and that, like early in recovery stuff. And so to me, a safe space is okay. I trust everyone in this space. I could be my authentic self. They're not going to hurt, harm, or put me in any danger, and I'm comfortable. So that's, in my opinion, a safe space.
Yeah. Uh, so, Tony, how does the presence of stigma around addiction impact the safety and effectiveness of these recovery spaces? And how do we combat this?
I want to say the most important thing is language and dialogue. Just using words that can reduce the stigma and choosing your words carefully, using inclusive language. Um, and so, for example, instead of using the stigmatizing word of substance abuse, you would say substance use. It's just a safer alternative. It's less judgy, it's less condemning. So language is a really huge part of what creates a safe space. Instead of the word abuser or substance abuser, drug abuser, a person with substance use disorder. Instead of a problem, which I don't see any of these individuals pose with this challenge as a problem, but instead of using the word problem, you could say risky or maybe even possibly unhealthy. But to say problem comes off a little judgmental and definitely exacerbates stigma around drug use and recovery. And then even with certain therapies and medication assisted treatment, medication for opioid and alcohol use disorder would be a better way of using dialogue to reduce stigma in a safe space.
Thank you. Keya, as a person who's in long-term recovery, what are some of the challenges that you've seen people face in recovery regarding safe spaces? You're on mute.
You.
Oh.
Sorry. So I've witnessed and experienced broken confidentiality. You want to be able to share things that's on your mind or share a situation that you may be going through and want to be able to trust someone to hear you out and not share that information with others. Active listening, not being heard in a safe space is detrimental, I would say. And what else? Yeah, what we talked about yesterday, let them share and not interrupt. And I am working on myself because sometimes I do that. I want to just do this, but I'm working on that. But sometimes a person just want to be heard. Just let them vent. They might vent about the same thing 30 days in a row. Let them vent and talk about it. And don't act like, oh, I don't want to hear it. Just let them vent, let them get through it. And I said it because I went through a situation where I had to understand that this person was going through a divorce and she was in some pain. And she's every single day that I talked to her, it was about that man, about how she hurt. And at one point I was like, she's talking about this so much. And I had to realize, wait a minute, she's getting it out. So don't make it about yourself when they're speaking. I had issues with that, learning experience. Someone to come and say, oh, I just been through this or been through this situation. And after they share, I'm like, me too. And I did this and I did that. And I'm ready to share what's going on with me when that person is really sharing to vent or to get some insight from their situation. So yeah.
I think it's also important to know, this just came and popped in my head. You never, even when it comes to the staff that is working with someone, they might have their own triggers, their own lived experience and things of that nature. So I think mindfulness in a safe space is also super important for the staff and for the participants as well.
That's good.
Yes, that's very good. And that goes back to what you were talking about before, Toni, about, you work at an agency that gives you that space to, like, if you need to take a mental health day, if you need to take a break, like, go do that, taking care of yourself as both uh there's people in recovery as well as the folks who are serving people in recovery. And sometimes those identities overlap. It's important that we are able to recognize those triggers, or just recognize that we might need to take a step back. Maybe we need to step away, take a break for a second, and come back to the work, because this isn't, just a walk in the park. We're dealing with people's lives and people's livelihood every day. And so it's important that we give ourselves the space that we need so that we can show up for them authentically and not make it about ourselves, as you both have said.
Yeah.
Yep, go ahead. You want to say something, Keya?
Oh no, I was agreeing. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna shift a little bit and go back to Toni talking about harm reduction. So what role does harm reduction play in recovery, and how can it coexist with abstinence-based approaches?
A very frequent debate in this field, isn't it? So harm reduction plays a crucial role in recovery by prioritizing the reduction of negative consequences associated with substance use in the event that that person is not ready to tackle abstinence. It basically focuses on minimizing harm. Unlike abstinence-based approaches that solely aim for complete cessation of substance use, harm reduction focuses on reducing the negative effects, like preventing overdose. So my response teams are equipped with Narcan every day. We're not going to go out there and preach to the people to not use, but we will educate them on how to use safely. Because we respect autonomy. If they are not ready to start their road to recovery, it won't be a successful road to recovery. We have to meet them where they are. So we just supply them with all the things we can for safe use. meeting people where they are, I just mentioned. And then strategies used in harm reduction can include distributing clean needles and syringes, providing Narcan and access to overdose reversal medication, educating about safer injection practices, and still linking individuals to treatment and supportive services. So when we go out and engage individuals in the community and it's substance use related, if they decline our services, we respect it, but we will still try to leave them with resources in the event that they change their minds. So that looks like where the nearest detox center is, or how to get some medical care, where to go. We'll give them a MARTA card to get there, things of that nature, just to really support and let them know that we are here to help, and we are a judgment-free zone. We re-engage the same people often, and I find that that trust that Keya was speaking on is super important. If you are working with an unhoused individual with substance use, they're not going to trust easily. They've experienced some things out here on the streets, right? They've experienced some things in some medical facilities. They've experienced some things maybe even in some peer support groups. So trust doesn't come easy. So when it comes to my response teams, we go out and re-engage. Our follow-up is strong. I'm committed to the follow-up because I want our population that we're serving to really understand, no, we're here for you. So you might not even choose us today, but we're going to come back and check on you next week, see if you changed your mind, see if you need anything else. And I think that continuous support, the continuous cheering, and that rapport building and trust building plays a huge part in harm reduction strategy, which assists recovery very, very well.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing about how your work intersects with this. Keya, I want to give you the opportunity to do the same. Like, are there things you're doing day to day in your work there that you feel like align with some of the things that we're talking about here today?
Something that jumped out of me is definitely the follow up. You know, we have people come in, they're feeling one way, we have a discussion, we get a little plan going on, but the follow up, just following up with that individual, just to see how they're doing, just to see if they need anything. I think that is very important because it shows that I'm concerned, it shows that I care, and it shows that I'm here for them. So definitely follow up is very important.
Yep, absolutely. Jocelyn has raised her hand. I'm going to uh, allow her. If you want to, Jocelyn, I see you dropped the question in the chat, but if you want to come off mute, you can. I've unmuted your mic.
Okay, so I put in the chat, I've got to ask you guys, how do we get past law enforcement with harm reduction and safe use kits, right? We've come a long way from when we originally started, where they were claiming that we could be charged with drug-related objects. And so we've come a long ways, but we're nowhere to where we need to be with getting law enforcement on board with our harm reduction, safe use, needle exchange, all of that stuff. Like, how do you overcome those barriers? I really would love to have some assistance there.
Jocelyn, I can't say that we've gotten it down yet or we're super successful at it. It is a constant uphill battle. And as you can see, the political climate is probably going to make it even harder for us right now. But what I will say is we are making sure that we as an organization are attending neighborhood association meetings. We are attending town halls. We are going to the city council meetings. We lean much more on community and partnership and really building relationship with other organizations doing like-minded work and really organizing a continuum of care type deal. And that really assists us and aids us in our day-to-day operation. And now we are, of course, always on the hunt for larger partnerships with larger organizations that have that track record, that have that respect, that can really be in those rooms of political discussion and throw our concerns in the ring on our behalf. And right now, that's kind of the strategy we're taking. But with I can speak to, we were fighting for our contract a few months ago, the renewal of our contract. And so a lot of innovation is going to come from that fight and all that went with it. your storytelling is probably your most powerful tool, and ours isn't very, very strong right now. So we are definitely going to strengthen that with our reporting, our data tracking and reporting. There are certain things that the powers that be are looking for. Some of that is cost reduction on their end, and we didn't really approach our storytelling like that. But I do know when it comes to the political things, the numbers is what they want to see. So if you're able to find a way to really show your impact with data, I would start there.
Keya, did you have anything you want to add to this?
No, but what jumped out on me is about the relationships, building relationships, building rapport in the community. That's a great start if law enforcement having events, because they put on events, connect with them with events, and just network. That just could continue to connect and build that relationship.
Yeah, and Heather, who was originally supposed to be a part of this, she wasn't able to join us because she's actually getting her CPS training this week. So congrats to her. But she did an event at her organization that was focused on providing lunch for the local law enforcement, just having them come into the recovery center just so they could get to learn about them. So I think what y'all are saying is very much on track. In my experience, years and years ago, when I was working in harm reduction, I did training for, this was back in Jersey, I did train for the entire Newark Police Department on syringe access programs because of what y'all are saying, like that stigma. Even though there was laws that protect people, they were still getting arrested if they had syringes on them or any of the paraphernalia. And I was able to get some donations of like gloves, like special needle stick gloves that law enforcement uses, and I handed those out to them. And so when they got that, now they were more willing to listen to what I had to say. And it was like, all right, here, I gave you something now. Could you please listen to me talk about this? And just kind of building those relationships with them definitely helps, definitely goes a long way.
Jody Ann, I'm so glad
Hopefully,
you mentioned that.
yeah, go ahead, Tony.
That actually just made something pop in my head. We do, my teams, I send them to the law enforcement roll calls weekly. So they'll go to a specific zone, and the start of their shift, law enforcement, of course, has a touch point for their day, and they will allow us to come in and just say, hey, remember we exist, please divert. These are the things you can divert to us for, and things of that nature. Now, I will say the energy in the room is not that great. We hate going. And so to improve those efforts, because of course, if one officer is having like a blah, blah, blah attitude towards the discussion, the rest of the room is going to basically get that attitude as well. So lately, what we've been doing is what I'm calling street level engagement. And in addition to attending those roll calls, and sometimes we may bring them fruit or donuts and things of that nature just so that we can powwow with them. But since the energy is usually so tense in the room, I've asked my teams to do street level engagement. So officers that are posted up in shopping centers or at gas stations, maybe that one-on-one intimate conversation about what PAD offers will win that officer over. We are also highlighting law enforcement liaisons for each zone. So we're identifying officers that divert to us more than others, and we're asking them to be a liaison, which is really just a point of contact for us that we might be able to invite to some meetings, or or we can have them help to influence the rest of their officers to divert to us. So we're looking for the officers that really support what we're doing, and we're bringing them in, having those conversations, strengthening those relationships, and then trying to send them back to their team to get their team to buy in.
That's awesome. Jocelyn, hopefully these are some tips that you find helpful. Shatana, you have your hand raised. Oh, let me allow you to come on off mute. Okay, go ahead. You are allowed to come off mute if you'd like, or you can drop the question in the chat if you'd like. Okay. While Shatana is dropping her question in the chat,
She wants to unmute and don't know how. Can I unmute her? Let's see if I can unmute. Nope.
Shatana, there should be on my screen, it's up at the top. It says mic, and you should be able to just click on it and no.
If she's on her phone, it's at the bottom of the screen.
Okay. It says it's blocked. That's interesting.
Oh, wow.
She's enabled on my, well, you could just drop your question in the chat and we'll try to get to it. Okay. The question I have for both of you, either one of you can take it, is what can communities do to better support individuals in all forms of recovery? We've talked about a lot of different things. We've talked about 12-step, we've talked about harm reduction, we've talked about nature, yoga, creativity, faith-based, celebrate recovery, all these things. What can communities do to support people in recovery? And so I guess it's the communities that aren't, I guess, directly related. I think one of y'all touched earlier on like healthcare providers and like, other folks that interface with this community.
That's exactly how I was going to start my answer. Okay, Keya, did you want to go?
You can go ahead. You can go ahead.
I can speak for the city of Atlanta and tell you we just don't even have enough resources for recovery here. So there are barriers at every turn as far as recovery here, whether that is, especially with our unhoused population. We can't expect them to have ID and documentation and up-to-date healthcare records and TB shots and all the things that a treatment facility may require for someone to enter that facility, insurance, access to insurance and healthcare benefits and all the things. And I think that is definitely like a much grander issue, challenge, barrier for people trying to recover from substance use disorder. And for the city of Atlanta, it is slim pickings for them to choose from, especially right in the metro area. There are other treatment options like further out, but of course, people are uncomfortable getting all the way out there if they don't have transportation, if that's not the area they know. So there's a lot of barriers that I think the city of Atlanta as a whole needs to improve on, and that is just the resources that are offered here and available.
Keya, did you want to answer that? And then we'll go back to Shatana's question in the chat.
Can you repeat the question again? Because I want to make sure I'm going to answer right.
Yes. What can communities do to better support individuals in all forms of recovery? So the way I'm viewing this question is the communities that are outside of like the recovery community, how can they support those folks?
Okay, so I want to bring up a situation. I love bringing up situations. So there was, I'm going to say a church. There was a church that reached out to me, and they heard my recovery story, and it was like, how do we help the recovering person? And I felt like they didn't understand, because at first I got offended. I was like, how you not know? But people don't understand what is actually going on. So I feel like that could be a barrier of not understanding. And I feel like communities should just embrace what is going on, get some understanding, hold some events, and provide support in helping people and persons in recovery.
Yeah, so having specific tasks or calls to action for them to do. Shatana was asking, where are your services up north? She's in the Gainesville, Georgia area. Do either of you have services available in that area?
No, I wish. I cannot wait until we're statewide, nationwide. But right now we are only responding to calls and providing case management for individuals in zones 1 through 6 of the Metro Atlanta, Fulton County area. But we do plan to expand.
Keya?
And I'm in Savannah, so there's I'm in Savannah. So yeah, and she's looking for resources in her area, so we don't provide resources there. but we provide
I
connections
can
and
assist
connection.
you. Right.
Yes, there we go.
I think we all three had the same idea. I was about to be like, but we could put something, I can drop the link in the chat for you.
Yeah, I can find some stuff.
Steve, I'm gonna allow you to come off mute. Did you want to talk a little bit more about what your comment in the chat? I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying here. You don't have to, but Steve says practice pink. Practice intentionally not knowing when talking to peers. Have more RCOs and ARCs. So RCO is a recovery community organization. ARC is, if anybody wants to define that acronym. Steve just hit us with all the acronyms. Steve, can you help us out a little bit? If you could just expound on your comment in the chat if you'd like, that's fine as well. But yeah, definitely more recovery organizations, and we know how. Oh, there you go.
Can you
Go
guys?
ahead.
Hi, Steve,
Oh,
personal recovery. And what that means, it's been 20 years. I found it necessary to use it altering substances. And I work for the Georgia Council for Recovery. And around the city and the state of Georgia, we do have recovery center organizations, and there are addiction recovery centers around the state. And those are options that you can plug into, where you can get resources. And up in the Gainesville area, somebody had just mentioned, up in the Gainesville area, you can get in contact. We have a couple of agencies up there. What I would encourage you to contact the Georgia Council for Recovery, and they could delegate and send you to some people that works in the Gainesville area, and you can get tapped into all type of resources. But I would encourage people, and you guys to talk to recovery community organizations and get one set up in your area, so we can advocate for recovery and let people know, because there's a lot of people in rural areas that don't know that, recovery is possible, recovery even exists, and we are the evidence, definitely are the evidence, and we have to get out and advocate. And earlier when you guys were talking about, interacting with peers and things, and when we talk to peers, a lot of times, when I talk to peers, when peers be talking to me, I practice intentionally not knowing, right? Because a lot of times I have to practice active listening. Because a lot of times when we talk to peers, right, we want to interject what we got to say before they finish talking. You know what I'm saying? And when people talk to us, we have to stand down, right? And just make sure that we hear them out, and let them make sure that they be heard. And a lot of times, we do know the answer, but when we're talking to people, we have to act like we don't know, and really truly, just interact with peers, and we can have better engagement, and people will let their guards down, and sharing your lived experience. I found out for me, it's most beneficial. When you talk with a person and you share your lived experience, then a person can say, "Wow, you did that also." And they come more adapt to breaking that wall down. And I heard you guys talking about stigma, and things. And plus language builds a lot anyway. It plays a big part in what we do, right? You know, just just think about it. What if all of us on the same line spoke the same recovery language? What kind of impact we would have? We would definitely have us impact if we all spoke the same recovery language, right? So it's just really and truly amazing. There's a lot of avenues and there's a lot of tentacles to this, but resources are available to but back to the person that asked for the question, I would encourage you to get in contact with the Georgia Council for Recovery, because there's RCOs all over the state of Georgia that people can plug into, addiction recovery centers that they can plug into, and you can get resources, and we can make a difference. That's all I want to share. Thanks for bringing me off mute. I did not want to come off mute, but thanks.
I appreciate it. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but
No, you're
you're
fine. You're fine.
that was
I
a
promise
lot
you,
of
you're
great
okay.
information. Practicing pink, practice intentionally not knowing. That's great. And I dropped the link for the Georgia Council for Recovery I dropped that in the chat, which is they are amazing organization. I'm sure most people are familiar with. So you could visit their link. Okay, we are coming up on time here. Are there any additional questions from the folks who have joined us as attendees today, or Keya or Toni? Anything else that y'all would like to add to this conversation about how we empower our loved ones to on their pathways to recovery?
What came to mind is just having an intelligent conversation with them. Have a little sit down at the table and just have a conversation on, ask questions to see if there's any issues or any feelings that's coming up. Provide information and understanding about the recovery process. I think that will help. I believe that will help.
Absolutely. Thank you, Keya. Toni? Oh, did Toni freeze? It looks like she's frozen. I mean, that's a pretty way to freeze, because usually when I freeze, I do not look at my screen. It always freezes when I'm talking. Oh, okay. Toni's in the chat. Feel free to drop whatever you want to drop in the chat, Toni. Shatana says, thank you both, ladies. I love what you shared and have learned a lot from this seminar. Yes, you both gave a lot of great information. Thank you both. Of course, thank you again to Sarita for providing ASL services. It's been a constant face on our webinars. And I dropped the link tree again in the chat. So the link tree brings you to all of the links that are related to this current Georgia Recovers campaign. It has our Instagram, our Facebook, our YouTube, our website. There's even a provider locator on there. So Shatana, maybe you can look through and that provider locator is through the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities. So you can get to search for providers all over the state through that provider locator. If you want to subscribe to our newsletter, I would ask that you do that using that link. You can also share your story. We were just in Savannah last week. We visited Keya and a couple other CIC members and collected some stories. If you want to share your story with us, we would love to hear it. We would love to share it back out to the rest of the Georgia community. Or if your organization would like to become a partner, we would absolutely love to have you. So all of those links are housed in that link tree that I dropped in the chat. Toni says, thank you for tuning in today. Such a pleasure to spend this time with you all. Thank you all again for joining in on today's webinar. That's so sweet. She says, Keya, you are resilient. I'm forever rooting for you. Yes, I agree. Thank you, Keya, and thank you, Toni, for all that you were able to provide today and for your insight and your intentionality in joining us in this space and sharing with everyone. Thank you all so much for joining. We'll see you again at our next webinar, which will be in April. So if you sign up to that webinar, you'll get that email when it comes out, when it's available. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.